Hey there, welcome to part 2 of The Martian by Andy Weir. So, did you know that um, the writer of The Martian, Andy Weir, is actually aerophobic? So, he's afraid of flying. So, now we'll do the characters. In the characters, we'll cover NASA, Watney, and the Ares 3 crew. So, with Mark Watney, uh, we have Mark Watney. Then we have the team itself, that is Commander Melissa Lewis, Major uh, Martinez, Beth Johannesson, and Vogel. Then we have NASA, which consists of a lot of people like Mindy, Venkat Kapoor, Teddy Sanders, etc. So, Mark Watney is the main character here, and he hogs about 95% of the narrative space in the novel. And the character over here was based on Weir himself. So, he goes on to say, Mark Watney is based on the idealized version of myself. He's what I wish I were. He's all the qualities I have that I like about myself and none of my flaws. So his personality was chosen specifically because, for the mission, because he was an asset to the group, because of how he handled his stress and moodiness. For example, he cracked jokes and made his crewmates and even himself laugh during really stressful times. And when you're reading the novel, you get a sense that you also find his humor is entertaining to you. So, throughout the novel, there's absolutely no change to his personality because this is a popular fiction novel, as it is almost like a requirement that the character does not really have a personality that has much depth to it, because we focus more on the plot in this type of a novel. So his most defining characteristics are he does not want to die and his sense of humor. There is no character growth for Mark because he is simply a stand-in for the reader. He is a one-dimensional character whose skills are tools for survival. So after that, we take a look at the Ares 3 crew. We have Commander Lewis, Martinez, Johansson, Beck, and Vogel. So Commander Lewis is the boss, and she is obsessed with disco. A very good leader. She's guilty for leaving Mark on Mars and wishes that she was sacrificed again instead. So again, all these characters just exist for the purpose of the plot. Then we have Martinez, who is Mark's BFF. No, not much is known about him except that he's good looking. And then we have Johansson, and Mark thinks of her as his sister. He sort of helps the love relationship but between Johansson and Beck. Then there is Beck, who is in love with Johansson and thanks Mark for helping him tell Johansson his feelings, or he would regret it forever. So the purpose of these two characters, Johansson and Beck, is just to show you that Mark is a good guy, basically. All the characters, sort of. Then there's Vogel, who is German and doesn't speak much, but when he does, he speaks with minor mistakes. For example, he says, I have the computer problem, stuff like that. Then we have NASA. NASA actually has an interesting character, interesting range of characters like Mindy Park, who actually has a shift in her situation because of Mark Watney. So she goes from rag to riches. She is a mechanical engineer. At the start of the novel, she works night shifts for NASA at a photo booth for scanning satellite images. At that point, she's very depressed and unsatisfied with her job. She's wondering what was the point of her really expensive degree. But then, after she discovers Watney is alive via the satellite images, she therein begins a series of events for her. Although very minor, not much space is given in the novel for her, you do get the sense that she moves up the ladder in NASA, and by the end of the novel, there's a power shift, and she's sort of like this space journalist, and also she is like more confident and satisfied and recognized for what she has done. So there's a shift in her character over there. There's a sort of a journey for her. Then there's Mitch, who is bold and brash. He's also a member of NASA, and he's responsible for the Ares 3 crew. And yeah, so Mitch helps the crew to go to get Watney back from Mars. Then there is Teddy Sanders. He acts as NASA's conscience. He is the man who heads the whole of NASA in this thing. So he is not just overseeing Ares 3, he's overseeing a lot of missions, and he has a lot of responsibility on his shoulders. So, as a consequence of that, he doesn't really like to take too many risks because he has to sort of weigh the whole picture. And because of this, he's sort of in the novel portrayed as like like this is not the way to be, this is not adventurous, this is not good, like, so he gets a lot of flake for being a character that's not that risk taking. Then there's Rich Purnell, who is a very, he's almost like a secondary to like the same way Watney is intelligent, Rich Purnell is also kind of a genius, but he has very bad social skills and he's extremely obsessed with his work. And he works tirelessly to organize the Purnell maneuver, which is basically getting Hermes to go back to Mars and get Watney back. Engineering all that was this guy. Then there's Venkat Kapoor. He's the reason why Mindy detected Watney via the satellite time. He's also a guy who's very dedicated to his work. And once he realizes that Watney is alive, he sort of pulls all strings. He works very tirelessly to make sure that Watney is alive and to be able to communicate with him and to help him out and get him back to Earth. So he's also excited as everyone else when Watney is successfully recovered. Themes are man versus nature. So Mars is a very barren wasteland, and it is an extreme situation to be the only human being stuck on a planet far like a billion light years away from Earth. So, in order to help Watney survive, NASA works overtime. China gives up a rocket booster meant for its own fledgling space program. The whole world is glued to Watney's recovery. Without all that effort, although it is just one man on Mars, the whole of humanity pulls together to get this man out from that situation, and to fight against the, and also beyond that, it's Watney himself. He's on a barren wasteland. He has to fight for his survival by using his intelligence, all the training that he did have at NASA, using his thinking skills, and also using his coping mechanisms to just survive there without in a very inhospitable environment. Then there is the importance of human connection. So every human being has a basic instinct to help each other out. The entire world comes together to save one man stuck on Mars. So one of the things you'll notice in the novel at the start, when Watney realizes that he's been left behind and he's probably going to die, he was more his first instinct after surviving and setting up a shelter for himself was to maintain a journal in which he could log in. Now, because he could not speak to anyone over there and there was no contact with any other human beings for a long time, He uses this log as a substitute for human interaction, and also immediately after he does get in touch with humans, from even though it was through Morse code or whatever, that immediately uplifts his, survival. Forget the survival, his psychological sense of well-being, like, and yeah, stuff like that. Like, there's a quote that he says, "I'm so glad that in space you can't. There is no sound because it's silent. Because uh, no one can hear me like squealing like a little girl or crying like a little girl." And this was with reference to him receiving a letter from his mother that was transmitted via NASA to space for him to see, and just the fact that he could communicate with his mother after a long time, even through a few emails, was very uplifting, and just something that is very important, human connection. Then there's humor as a coping mechanism. So Watney, one of an example of this is, since there's a lot of 70s and 80s music left behind for him by, I think, Age Johannesson, or the captain, I forgot her name. He picks "Staying Alive" as his theme song, and he keeps listening to that. And it's kind of funny that he does that, because "Staying Alive" is a very hip song, and here's this man who's stuck on Mars in a very desolate situation. Even with contact from Mars, you know that he may not make it. It is such a dire situation, and it's unimaginable to be. It is not something that anyone wishes upon themselves. So in that situation, he manages to be really, really funny. Then there's another quote: "Problem is, follow me closely here. The science is pretty complicated. If I cut a hole in the hab, the air won't stay inside anymore." So he sort of tricks the reader into thinking that here's going to be some really complicated stuff. But then he just, tells you something that's really simple, and you just have to laugh at the nerve of this guy who's stuck on Mars, who's probably going to die, but has the time to play a practical joke on the reader. Anyway, so did you know that in 2015 Golden Globes, the film adaptation of The Martian, so at the Golden Globes, The Martian actually won Best Comedy of the Year. Now, if you think about the plotline of The Martian, even at first I was like, this won't be a comedy, right? Because if you look at the name of it, the idea that you get by thinking of something in outer space, comedy isn't exactly the first word that would come to mind. So why is The Martian considered a comedy? That's because there's a use of tension relief. So when a joke, Owen Lynch, in General Principles of Tension Relief Theory, says, when a joke or laughter is used to reduce tension or stress, humor can be considered to provide a relief function. A good example can be seen in using humor as a face saving behavior in negotiation and mediation to reduce tension. Now, considering that this story is so dire in terms of its setting, you're on a planet which is inhospitable to you living there, it doesn't want you there. And you're just fighting to just survive over there. Even with equipment, it's very difficult, and you're at constant risk of, I don't know, exploding or dying or having not enough regulated temperatures. There are so many things that you could die of. It's way worse and way harder than living on Earth. So, with this dire sort of setting around him, Watney sort of uses comic tension relief to help keep his the tone of his novel very light. I mean, the tone of his whole attitude towards being in this situation is very light and banterish and upbeat, sort of. Even when you read the novel, you don't get a sense. You get the sense of the twists and turns, but it feels more like an adventure, not like doom and gloom and you're going to die sort of a thing, even though that is exactly the situation that you're in. So he's stuck out there. He thinks he's totally okay. This is an excerpt from the book. NASA is like saying, the psychologist at NASA sort of is wondering out aloud. He's stuck out there. He thinks he's totally alone and that we all gave up on him. What kind of effect does that have on a man's psychology? He turned back to Venkat. I wonder what he's thinking right now. And then we cut to the log entry on Soul 61. That is Watney's entry. And he's like, and now we get to see what is at that exact moment where that psychologist is pondering what is this man alone on Mars thinking about. We see that he's thinking about how come Aquaman can control whales. They are mammals, makes no sense. So this jarring difference in the tone of what NASA is thinking versus what what's his name? Watney is thinking is what creates the tension relief. Like, because when the psychologist says that, even you as a reader sort of are like, oh my god, this man is alone on Mars, what is he thinking? Like, this could actually affect him negatively. But then we get to know Watney's what he writes there, and then we realize he's such a douche bag, but in a funny way. Anyway, so these tension reliefs are further divided into two types. One is gallows humor, which is grim and ironic humor in a desperate or hopeless situation. So of course these fall into the territory of dark humor. So sort of. So NASA is asking Watney, how did you feel when you first realized you were alone on Mars? Then Mark Watney is like, well, at first I was afraid. NASA is like saying nothing. Mark Watney is again like nothing. Then NASA says nothing. Then Mark Watney is like, I was petrified. So again, you can see that he's again cracking a joke when he's asked a serious question, and he could answer that question in a very serious way, because if you read the novel, you'll know that he did go through a lot of hardships just being there. But what he chooses to do instead is crack a joke about I Will Survive by Gloria Estefan. Like, at first I was afraid, I was petrified. Like, you can almost imagine it in your head. It's kind of like, it's funny, I suppose. Then another thing that he does is, he does this so constantly throughout the novel. He'll just reference things that almost killed him and be really light about it. So like when I think something blew up of his, he was like, maybe I'll post a consumer review. Brought product to surface of Mars. It stopped working, 0 out of 10. So like that lightness of his attitude towards something that probably would have killed him, it's just it cuts through the seriousness of the novel. As with most life's problems, this can be solved by a box of pure radiation. Again, he's doing that thing. Then I started the day with some nothing tea. Nothing tea is easy to make. First get hot water, then add nothing. So things like that, he takes whatever bad situations he has around him, converts them into jokes. Then there's also black comedy, which he uses. Now, black comedy is a comic style that makes light of subject matter and is generally considered taboo, particularly subjects that are normally considered serious or painful to discuss. So it's very similar to the dark humor, dark black comedy thing. To the gallows comedy, but gallows is primarily focused more on like death. Okay, so here he's talking about, actually I was a very low strength member of the crew. I would only be in command if I were the only remaining person. What do you know? I'm in command. So when he's the only person on Mars because his crew members have left him behind, he just reflects that, since I'm the least experienced, least trained, I'm the least qualified person in the crew, and if anything happened, I was supposed to be the last person that they would put in charge. And now, since I'm the only person remaining on Mars, I'm in charge. So it's sort of like that. Then everything went great right up to the explosion. So again, he keeps cracking jokes all the time. Okay, now why is The Martian considered pop fiction? The Martian is Oh yeah, and with reference to his jokes, I did not even come to the crassest, most vulgar jokes that he cracks for the sake of, I don't know, I have no idea. Anyway, The Martian is pop fiction because it is a plot driven. The characters here don't have much depth. Then the characters are stock figures who only function to serve the plot. Then exotic and unfamiliar settings, for example, here we are on Mars. Then there's simple and plain language used. Watney is pretty simple despite being a botanist and a mechanic and an engineer. His language is pretty simple. Everyone's language, even NASA, it's like they all communicate in like there's nothing hi-fi about it except when they're doing calculative stuff. And then there's dialogue, which is it's written as spoken. Yeah, and that's it. These are my references, and thanks for watching.